here? Because I'm excited to talk about next week's episode.
Oh, me too. I don't think so. I have everything crossed off my list here. I mean, this was, the last thing I want to say about this episode is, you know, this episode is a little bit of a departure for us. Normally we're looking at these just, these horrifying tragedies in this industry or some of the darkest stories. And it was really for us to kind of be able to do something a little different and kind of, it was a good challenge to basically take a story, where we're really talking about 20 seconds of time, like a 20-second moment in time, when these two slaps occurred, and can we build a whole episode out of it? And so I actually really liked the challenge of putting this together and having it be more of a quote unquote fun episode, to where there is some humor in it. But at the same time that there are, stakes to the story, and, all of this was very real for David, and, he definitely did lose his career, but thankfully, he really came into his own and got into probably the perfect business for someone like him, which is bounty hunting. So, but this whole thing was a really fun process to make this episode, even though there was a lot of politicking back and forth, uncertainty, and being worked and all around and stuff. It was a cool departure for us to do an episode like this, I have to say.
Well, next week is going to be something that I feel like a lot of wrestling fans are going to learn for the very first time. Way before there was a Starcast, there was a guy named John Arezzi who didn't have a podcast, but he had a hot wrestling radio show in the New York market, and he decided to parlay that into a massive wrestling convention, maybe the first of its kind. It was a who's who attended, including Ric Flair and Paul Lee, and famously Herb Abrams, who decides that he wants to announce a super promotion where his booker will be Blackjack Mulligan, who happens to be in prison. And, one of his key stars will be Bruiser Brody, who is dead. And yet somehow he managed to finagle quite the little upstart with syndicated television all over the country and major figures participating. And we examine next week the good, the bad, and the ugly, how it went sideways. And let me give you a bit of a spoiler. Dave Meltzer called BS on this guy very quickly in the Observer, and kept poking and prodding at Herb until eventually there's an enhancement talent match that happens on one of these shows. And Dr. Death squashes a guy named Little Davy Meltzer. And then at the end of the match, stuck a sheet in his mouth and covered him with a bag of dirt. Get it? Dirt sheet. Mm-hmm. This crazy person was at least at one moment thought to be an influential person in wrestling. And we examine how crazy it was. And by the way, what we've just talked about does not even scratch the surface. Is that fair to say, Evan?
Yeah, I am very excited to unveil this episode next week. It's been a whole, making this episode has been a complete full-on discovery for both Jason and I. This story was not something that we were super hip to when we started making it. It was something that we're going into these interviews and just genuinely, because most of the interviews you do, you're pretty prepared and the story, the kind of where you want it to go and how the story you're kind of wanting to tell. But for this, it was literally just all the interviews we did, I was being blown away. And the cast of characters that we have for this episode. You mentioned John Arezzi is an amazing guy, incredible guy. Yeah. He's one of my favorite interviews in the piece, actually. And then Mick Foley, comes back to Dark Side of the Ring because he really cut his teeth in Herb Abrams' UWF. And he's incredible in the episode as well. He definitely has some amazing stuff in it. And yeah, this is like the way that I've been kind of describing this episode to people, and forgive me if this sounds too industry, but I've been kind of describing it as Boogie Nights meets the Fire Festival of Wrestling.
Oh, wow.
In terms of a way to kind of describe just what's in store for next week, in terms of this This is the very minimal rise and epic downfall of this wrestling organization that, you know, tried to basically do kind of what WCW would eventually do, right? Is like, you know, put together a roster of, you know, former WWE talent and really try to compete, go head to head with a TV deal, except for, I mean, this is on a way lower scale than that, but it unfortunately failed pretty miserably. And it was all kind of the creation and the dream and the motivation of a man named Herb Abrams, who is this enigmatic, charismatic, definitely, individual in cowboy boots who, you know, essentially got everyone to believe in his vision. It's just that the vision didn't quite get executed, is one way to put it. And then you won't believe the last 10 minutes of the episode.
Yeah, it was a dream that became a nightmare very quickly.
It's remarkable. You've got to go out of your way to see it. I learned so much. I have a new Holy Grail belt I need to find. And
yes, I was gonna say, it is the coolest wrestling belt. Like, well, I should rephrase that. It's a very unique wrestling belt.
Oh, fuck. I think it's the coolest wrestling belt.
It's tremendous.
It is really cool. It's so, yeah.
Especially when you understand the backstory. Like when you just see the belt for what it is, you're like, oh my God, look at this. But then you hear the story and you're like, okay, that's pretty fucking cool.
It's
yeah, it is. Yeah, it's actually one of the moments in the episode where you're like, all right, Herb's got a good sense of humor. Herb's all right.
Well, and the line of the series comes from Mick Foley at the very end. I feel like you guys you're on to something now. This great line from John Stossel in this week's episode and the tremendous home run line from Mick Foley next week. Just fantastic. Can't recommend it enough. So excited for everybody to see this. We'll be back next Wednesday to break it down. Of course, you need to join in the conversation. Use hashtag Dark Side of the Ring. And of course, be sure to catch the Abrams episode next Tuesday night, 10 p.m. Eastern on Vice. I have DirecTV. It's channel 271 for me. And, I guess we should mention you guys have a lot of different social media platforms that we could plug and let people see some more behind the scenes content. Evan, give them those handles.
Yeah. You can follow us at Dark Side of Ring on Twitter and at Dark on Instagram. I'm at Evan Husney on Twitter and Instagram, and Jason is at Jason. Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'll jump in.
No, you tell him.
Jason Eisner at Twitter and Instagram.
There you go.
I am at Hey, it's Conrad, and we are out of time. We'll see you tomorrow for another episode of Grillin' JR, and next Wednesday for another Dark Side of the Podcast. I've been telling you for a long time that SaveWithConrad.com can save you money, but don't take my word for it.
Now, James, what made you come to Save with Conrad in the first place?
I needed a refi. I've been listening to Conrad's show for a couple of years. It was very, it was very competitive with what I was seeing locally and with my current lender. So I just decided to throw my business at Conrad.
Was there anything specific that Conrad said on the shows that kind of made you take that first step?
Interest rates are historically low, and 2 months without a mortgage payment seemed a really good deal.
Off the top of your head, how much money were you able to save through Save with Conrad?
Man, I don't know what the overall savings is going to be. I needed to cash out to cover some other outstanding debts, and the rate I was able to drop the rate down by almost a point, and basically keep my same payment but cash out enough to cover those outstanding debts and have a little left over for a rainy day.
Oh, that's great.
It's pouring down rain here.
Would you recommend Save with Conrad to any of your friends or family?
Oh, sure.
So what are you waiting for? Find out how much money you can save right now for free. You don't need perfect credit or money out of your pocket. Even credit scores in the 500s can be approved. And if we can't save you money, we won't waste your time. But because we're licensed in more than 40 states, we can help more families than ever before. Find out how much money you can save right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com. Oh, and did I mention you could skip your next 2 house payments? Hurry to SaveWithConrad.com.